Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere or sometime along an indefinable line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Makeshift Stories presents a monthly journey into the improbable.
Today's story, episode 214, The Tracer, read by Mitchell 2. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, hubris might be the weakness which lets your enemy slip away. At first, I didn't give the unassuming little man pressed against the wall of the corridor a second thought, as we charged past intent on our target, one Roberto H. Hughes. My fleeting impression was of a person whom you'd walk by and never notice, dressed like the wallpaper they stood in front of, both selected specifically to be forgotten. Perhaps his all-too-convenient ordinariness was why I made a special note of the brief encounter. The office door was locked, and after several knocks with no response, I nodded to my agents to force it. 3 precisely placed kicks at the surprisingly cheap latch, and the door erupted open. We rushed through, hoping to take Hughes by surprise, but spilled into an empty suite. It was a typical high-end office condo, tastefully furnished to exude the air of success and stability. Everything rented through a dummy company, so nothing would be traceable. It was the perfect setup, but I wouldn't have expected anything less from the target. Pumped by the adrenaline of the chase, I paced through the room several times before remembering the encounter in the hall, then kicked myself for my bullheaded single-mindedness. Hughes, disguised as the diminutive man, had walked right past us, foiling months of tracking and careful planning with a simple ruse. Sure, he was shorter, thinner, and several decades younger, which would fool almost everyone. However, knowing the target's unique abilities, I knew better and should have been on the lookout for something like this. I left my colleagues in the abandoned office to search for evidence, doubting they would find anything, and made my way down to the lobby to talk to building security in the hope they recorded their CCTV cameras. After presenting my ID to a nervous-looking commissionaire, she showed me to a small, squalid, windowless office, where her partner, paying more attention to his lunch than the security screens, almost choked on a hoagie when we burst in. The startled man coughed, then quickly tried to wipe crumbs and drops of mustard off the security system console. "Riley, this is Agent Samard." The woman introduced me, sneering at her colleague's mess. It obviously hadn't been the first time she had caught him sloughing off. "He wants to get a copy of the lobby footage from all 3 cameras for the last 2 hours. The 3 of us watched as Riley scrolled nervously through the feed until I spotted the man I had seen in the hall walk into the frame. "Okay, I need to see if that person entered any time today." I handed a high-density memory stick to the commissionaire. He looked at it dubiously. "It'll hold all the data," I assured him without further explanation, then waited impatiently while he ineptly fumbled through the transfer. Charlie and Van had the apparent victim between them in the back seat when I got back to the rented SUV. Van got out to let me take her place, and I slipped in beside Dr. Tremblay. She, like all the others we had discovered, looked shell-shocked. "Dr. Tremblay," I stated, without introducing myself. The slight, middle-aged woman nodded, then suddenly flipped from a frightened deer to angry grizzly. "Who are you? How do you know my name? Why are you holding me?" She snapped angrily. "We're not holding you. We're here to protect you. We just want to ensure that you're okay." "If you're not arresting me, then let me go," she demanded, and started to struggle out of her seat. Charlie automatically moved to restrain her, but I waved him off. "I'm Agent Samard." I held up my ID. "It's Mr. Hughes we're interested in, not you." Although that wasn't entirely true. "Just a few questions, then you can go. Do you remember what you told him, or why you were meeting with him?" Tremblay stopped squirming, then turned to face me with a suddenly ashen expression. No, I don't have a clue. I was there I'm not sure. She struggled with her words, then gave up after failing to put a coherent thought together. We know you're a plasma physicist. Did it have anything to do with your work at the High Energy Physics Institute? I understand your funding was recently cut. I asked, knowing financial need was one of the lures the target used to attract victims. How did you? Tremblay looked surprised and indignant. No, we keep a file on everyone who has been in contact with Mr. Hughes. Since our government grant wasn't renewed? She gave me an accusing stare, which said by virtue of association she blamed me as well for its loss. I've been forced to look for more unconventional funding sources. Like selling potentially sensitive data? What did you give him, Dr. Tremblay? I accused, but didn't really care. Whatever it was would be ripped from this time's gestalt, like matter sucked into a hungry black hole. I don't know, but it wasn't that kind of information. He said he was a collector of experiences. I haven't a clue how that would work. Do you? Unfortunately, I knew the process all too well, but couldn't admit it. The agent in the front passenger seat handed me their tablet. I see that a great deal of money was transferred to your account. I suspect this wasn't a donation. Honestly, I don't remember, Dr. Tremblay insisted. I went up to his office, then I found myself on the street, where your bulldogs abducted me against my will. And that's it. That's all I can recall. I interrogated her face, looking for a sign she was concealing something. But like all the others, I knew she would remember nothing. In fact, I could feel the surgical hole in her mind where an important experience had once been. Its ragged edges were already starting to knit back together, and soon she would no longer sense the emptiness left by the extraction. I surreptitiously attached a tracker to her briefcase. I believe you. Dr. Tremblay, you're not the first victim of this man. You are free to go. However, in case we want to talk to you again, I'll need a contact number. I'm sure you already know it, she accused me scornfully, then started to struggle out of her seat again. I nodded to Charlie to let her go. The office boardroom was full by the time I arrived. The rest of the team had crowded in and were waiting anxiously for the results of the raid. It hadn't been hard to slip unnoticed into their culture and insinuate my way onto the special task force. Perhaps that's why it had chosen this place as a new base of operation. I have been tracking this one for years, across many different worlds. It considers itself a collector, a connoisseur of rare experiences, and cares little about the damage it does, through changes it inadvertently makes by removing an experience at a critical moment from a world. At best, it's a self-centered hoarder, focused on personal gratification. At worst, it's a demon, bent on feeding its desires at any cost. I can only dream of how things might have been if it had never turned up. After decimating our future by skimming off the inventions of the best creative minds of my generation, I followed the thing through its many different manifestations to this time and place. I'd like to tell myself I'm not motivated by revenge, that I'm acting altruistically, but it wouldn't be true. Hughes slipped by us, I reluctantly announced to the room. How? How could that even happen? Anita Rivera, the lead agent in charge of the operation, was miffed. He somehow noticed us before we got to his office, I noted. There was a security system. He must have had access. Regardless, he had time to disguise himself. There was a man in the hall on the way in. I'm guessing it was him. We've got footage from the CCTV cameras. My explanation didn't sate Rivera's anger, and her eyes tried to drill through me, until she turned away, huffed, and threw up her arms in frustration. Look, people, we've been chasing this guy ever since we discovered that astronaut running for office who completely forgot the most important spacewalk she ever did. We would have never known about this slime ball without a reporter asking the candidate about their role in the repair of the space telescope. The campaign manager was quick to redirect the question and smart enough to call us in. Now, this scientist makes 23 victims, or attacks, or whatever, and we don't even know what he's after or why. Rivera stabbed at her laptop, casting a slide of the victims' faces to the boardroom screen. All these people are in potentially important positions, especially the scientist, and that's genuinely concerning. The only common thread is they all met with Hughes to either trade or sell something, and they all now have blank spots in their memories. Some, like the astronaut, we know what is missing, but others, like the scientist, Rivera circled Dr. Tremblay's photo with her cursor. We don't. I was distracted by the image of a diminutive man near the lower left corner of the slide, an aerospace engineer according to the caption. He was the person we had passed in the hall, which made sense. As far as I know, collectors, they call themselves experiologists, can only manifest as people whose minds they've harvested. This was how I'd tracked the thing before, by identifying its prey, then looking for a duplicate. We had almost cornered the thing today. Next time, I would catch it. Agent Simard. Rivera looked away from the screen to glare at me, jerking my attention back to the present. Let's see that security footage now. I handed her the micro drive I transferred a few select excerpts to on the drive over. It was from a camera above the elevators, which didn't provide a clear view of the target's face. I wanted them to believe it was Hughes in disguise, and nothing more. Rivera scanned through the footage until a man, seen from behind, appeared in the frame, headed for the entrance. Just before the figure pushed through the big glass doors, it paused and turned briefly to face back into the lobby. Hold that frame, Rivera demanded. She launched out of her seat, then marched over to the projection screen and took off her glasses to squint at the pixelated image. That's... She snapped her fingers. That's one of those victims. The aerospace guy. What's his name? Isn't he supposed to be somewhere on the West Coast? Ping his location. Two low-ranking agents, whose names I've never bothered paying attention to, began hammering away at their laptops. I had missed the thing momentarily swinging its head back when I initially scanned the footage. However, it was relatively small in the frame, and the intense sunlight outside burning through the plate glass had forced the cheap sensor in the camera to silhouette the face. Thankfully, pure white and black hold little data, making it easier to obfuscate the truth. Mr. Setter is in the Vancouver-Seattle region, the more ambitious of the two junior agents proclaimed. Then how could he be in this video? Rivera groused. Are you sure? I have a picture of the target from a CCTV camera that's only 15 minutes old. The other junior announced, confidently smiling at his colleague. It's from the lower Fraser Valley. Frowning skeptically, Rivera marched over to the second junior, whose bravado quickly wilted. Let me see that file. She shouldered the young man out of her way, then tapped at the keyboard before dragging her fingers through her hair, huffing. Something's not right here, she exclaimed, to no one in particular. Agent Rivera, I intervened tentatively. What? The image in the surveillance footage is marginal. Think Occam's razor. It's got to be Hughes in disguise. The target is smart, probably planned this. What I'm saying is Hughes could have left the building without looking back. I think that was deliberate, intended to throw us off. I suspect even Hughes is a disguise, so we don't know what the target actually looks like. But we know he'll strike again. The average interval between victims is 20 days. We just need to monitor internet traffic. He'll try again. Rivera considered my argument, then, after an awkward silence, reluctantly gave in to its logic. That makes sense, Agent Simard. I'll get our cyber surveillance unit on it. But you're not going to be on the next raid. You messed this one up. I'm reassigning you to desk duty. I can't afford to let Hughes slip through our fingers again. Which suited me fine. I had managed to distract them from searching for the duplicate. Discovering its shape-shifting abilities would raise too many questions. However, I hadn't lied about the timing of the next incident. Collectors appear to be addicted to the experiences they extract. It's like a drug whose effects wear off after a week or so, driving them to seek more. After feeding the photos of all 23 victims into the agency's facial recognition system, I got a match. 2 Dr. Tremblays. I was surprised at its brashness, but it made sense. Up to now, assuming it would move on, we hadn't kept close tabs on its recent victims, other than to assure their health. Distinguishing the real from the copy was easy using the tracker I had placed on the woman's briefcase. The thing's choice for a new base of operations was too audacious to believe. It was an office building only a block away from where we had almost trapped it. It was either feeling untouchable or being strategic, assuming we wouldn't look in the same place twice. I had hacked into the tower's security system and used it to locate a suite of rooms on the 19th floor, which the fake Tremblay appeared to frequent. The sign on the door claimed it was a private research company, and it was unlocked. I checked the hall in both directions before shouldering the expensive-looking wooden veneer door open. An excruciating headache greeted me as I regained consciousness, sprawled across a strange lobby floor, with the security guard filling my blurred vision, looking concerned. "Are you all right?" she asked, then thumbed her two-way radio. "He's come around. Do you need an ambulance, sir?" "No." I shook my head. The last thing I needed was to be examined. "I'll be okay. No ambulance." What had I been doing? I asked myself, suddenly realizing I didn't know. Makeshift Stories is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. To get other great APN podcasts, head over to albertapodcastnetwork.com and take a listen to My Viewfinder and join David Yoon as he interviews photographers on how they approach their craft. This episode of Makeshift Stories is brought to you by Shift Podcast by Alberta Innovates. Shift showcases the work being done in the province's innovation ecosystem, everything from health to clean energy. Join hosts Katie Dean and John Hagen as they interview the researchers, entrepreneurs, and businesses that are shifting our perspective about innovation in the province. Listen to guests such as Garth Warner, President and Chief Executive Officer of Service Credit Union, discuss how through stewardship and values, Service has set the bar quite high amongst not only credit unions, but more traditional banking institutions by achieving unprecedented success on all levels. Find Shift Podcast by Alberta Innovates on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find it at shift.albertainnovates.ca. That's shift.albertainnovates.ca. This episode of Makeshift Stories is also brought to you by ATB Financial. At ATB, we make banking work for you. With expert and practical advice in everyday banking and investment planning expertise and management services with ATB Wealth, you can be confident that you're making smart choices when it comes to your money. We have a history of doing what's right for our clients, especially when times are tough, because ATB was built to help Albertans. For more information, visit atb.com. Makeshift Stories is released twice a month around the 1st and the 15th. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Mitchell II. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. You can help us out by getting your friends to subscribe wherever they listen to audio. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.